Hello YouTube, welcome back to my channel. So in today's tutorial, we're going to go ahead and start the first tutorial of building our API, right? So in this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and see how we can be able to go ahead and start building our API. So the first thing we need to do, we talked about building this application using React and FastAPI, right, as the backend and the React as the front end. So this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and actually design our database that we'll be using for our API. So design a simple database of 2 tables, and then we'll be using Pydantic Models and stuff like that. If you're new to FastAPI, don't worry, we'll go over all these concepts. So let's get ahead and actually start our virtual environment. So I've opened up my terminal here, and I'm going to navigate to my desktop. So I'm going to go to back one directory, and I'm going to create a folder here. I'm going to call it Fast API React tutorial, just like that. And I'm going to change the directory into that. So you can create a folder on your desktop or anywhere you want, and then make sure that you navigate into that directory. So now that you're in that directory, it's just an empty directory. You can see I have no content in there. So now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and actually create a Python virtual environment so that you can install all our dependencies. So we're going to go ahead and actually say Python. So how to create a virtual environment in Python is actually very easy. What you have to do is simply type in Python, type in as I type Python 3 or Python, and then VEN -m, so rather, and then VENV. Okay, so make sure that you type it like that. So this VNV could be anything that you want, but these other commands must be as they are. And if you're on Windows, make sure that there is a different way of creating a virtual environment on Windows. So if you're on Windows, make sure that you Google how to create a virtual environment. But if you're on a Linux like me or a MacBook, then that is how you create a virtual environment. But for Windows, it's a bit different. So just go ahead and Google and see how you can create a virtual environment for Windows. It's actually very simple. So now that you have done that, let's go ahead and actually create that virtual environment. So now that the virtual environment is being created, we'll need to go ahead and actually install a couple of libraries. But before we do that, let's make sure our virtual environment is activated. So I'm just going to ls. You can see we have a folder in there called VENV. So now I'm going to go ahead and actually activate this. So I'm going to say source VNV, which is the name of the folder, /bin /activate. So this is going to activate my virtual environment for me. So let me just make sure this is actually VENV, and then press enter. You can see now my virtual environment is activated, and is the name of the virtual environment is within parentheses right before the other lines within the terminal. So now this shows that our virtual environment is activated. Now let's go ahead and actually try to install the libraries that you're going to be using. So I'm going to go to FastAPI official documentation. This is the FastAPI that you're going. This is the API that you're going to be creating with all these endpoints. So now, in this video, we're going to just design the database for this API. So I'm just going to go to FastAPI, and you can tell this is the installation that they tell you to install. So you need to copy this, go back to your terminal. Then you need to paste this here. So I'm going to paste that in there, and then press enter. This will go ahead and actually install that for me. So to paste, you have to press Ctrl Shift and V. If you're on a Linux, I don't know about the other operating systems, but if I mean, you can just also use the mouse if you want. So yeah, so you can see now we have FastAPI, a FastAPI already installed. And for the database, we need to install something known as Tortoise ORM. So I'm going to be using Tortoise ORM. So for Tortoise ORM is very fast. It supports async in Python, async await. So let me just go ahead and actually let's get started. So let's see how we can install it. Let's search for it. So let's say go to getting started, and let's say this is the installation process. So I'm going to install this. So I'm going to copy this, copy that, and I'm going to go back to my terminal, and I'm going to do paste it again. This will install for us the Tortoise ORM, which is going to be the database that we'll be using for our API. Okay, so all that is installed. I'm going to click this, and I'm going to open Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to press code. It's just going to open from Visual Studio Code. Open Visual Studio Code or whatever editor that you're using. Yeah, so feel free to use any editor that you want. PyCharm, Visual Studio Code, anything that you want. It's Sublime Text, just feel free. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and actually go and create our app. So I'm going to call this app.py. So in here, this is where we're going to our Flask app is going to reside. So first of all, we need to import it. So I'm going to say from FastAPI import you need to import fast API. Watch out for the casing. So from FastAPI, import FastAPI, and then we need to go ahead and create the app. So we're going to say fast. It's just like very similar to Flask, right? If you have ever used Flask, for those of us who have ever used Flask, is the same situation, right? So now that we have that, we don't need to say if name is optional. We can go ahead and begin to create routes. So you can say app dot get. So this is how we create routes in FastAPI. So instead of using app.route in Flask, in FastAPI we use app.get. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go and actually create an API, a simple a route called get, and I'm going to say def, and I'm going to call it index, and then we're going to simply return a dictionary, which is going to be let's say message, and then we're going to give it a data of sorry, I pressed the wrong key, so close this, and then I'm going to say hello world. So I'm just going to return that. So now we can go ahead and actually begin to run our API. And then if you go to localhost at port 8000, it's run by default. FastAPI runs at localhost at port 8000. You're going to simply going to get back this in form of JSON. So it does JSONifying in the back end, unlike FastAPI where you have to do it yourself. This one, it takes care of it, since FastAPI is just built to deal with APIs in Python, right? So let's get started. So let me just go back to terminal, clear this, make sure I'm in the directory, and I'm going to say make sure my virtual environment is activated, and I'm going to say uvcon, and then the name of the app, the name of the file, and then the name of the app, the instantiation of the app. So if you, this is a, let me just show you, this is the name of the app, of the file, right? We call the file app, right? The file which you're writing the code, we call it app.py, right? And then for our instantiation of the app, we also call it py. We also call it app. Okay, so rather, so if I come in the terminal, I type in the name of the file, which is app, and then colon, and then the name of the instantiation of the app, and then I can also specify an optional reload, so we don't have to reload every time we make changes. So I get an error. So now, okay, the reason why I get this error is that I forgot one more thing. We need to install another library called uvcon. So we need to say pip install uvcon. So uvcon is just a server that FastAPI uses to run the web application. So we're going to run on this server called uvcon. So now it's installed. Let's go ahead and actually try to run that again, and you can see our server has started on localhost at port 8000. So I'm going to go to localhost. This you can see here, I'm already on localhost at port 8000. So let me just this was for the last tutorial of introduction. So let's go to refresh that, and you can see we have we got a detail not found. So let's go back to our app and see why we're getting that error. So we are saying app.get, and then you're saying / this is going to be the get, and an index, so we're going to be returning hello world. Okay, so now let's try to refresh this. We're getting back not found. So let's try to go to / docs, and then we're getting FastAPI, we're getting no aspect. So let's make sure, see why we're getting that error. So you're saying FastAPI instantiating app.get app.index, and then you're simply going to return we're going to return this dictionary of hello world. So if I check, we're getting back a 404 not found. So yeah guys, I have just spotted my error. So I forgot that it's actually a decorator. So this is actually a decorator, my bad. So I forgot that error, so sorry for that. It's actually a very silly error that I made. So now that we have the decorator there, so we can now go back to our front end, right? We can go back to our front end and then try to refresh this. We can see we get back hello world. So just to put that was my error, I forgot the decorator, and I have to take a look at the documentation, and I just realized that I forgot the decorator right here. Okay, so my bad, sorry for that. Let's get continue with this. So let me just close some of these windows so that we can have space room for that. So now that's a simple API that we have built, and that's how you can return a simple hello world message from an API. So this is just basically an API, but the only is very similar to Flask. Like in Flask we have at app.route, but in here you have the at app dot the type of method of that route, right, which is get or post, delete, or something. Yeah, so that's all. Now that we have that running, let's go ahead and actually create another folder, another file rather. We're going to call in models models.py. So in models.py, this is where we're going to make our databases, or we call them models. Or okay, so we're going to say from Tortoise from Tortoise.models, you're going to be importing you're going to be importing model, and then we're also going to say from Tortoise. This is actually from Tortoise. You're going to also going to import, I don't know why it keeps giving me that, import fields. So let me fields, yeah, and then yeah, that's all we need for now. So let's go ahead and actually create a class, and then this is going to be very similar to, we can call it product. So for product, in here we're going to inherit from model, right? This is going to be a model. So now that we have inherited from model, we can provide in the ID, and the ID is going to be fields dot int this is going to be int. Today autocomplete is just bugging me, so there's going to be int dot field, and then this is going to be a primary key, so we're going to say pk is true. So we're going to say the primary key is going to be 2. So the ID is going to be our primary key, and then we can also specify the name, and then the name is going to be fields dot this is going to be a car field, so it's going to be a character field. Okay, so this is going to be a car field, and then we can provide in the other attribute like the max length. We can specify the max length to be, let's say the product name, let's say max length is 30. We can also provide in nullable, meaning that it cannot be nullable. Let me show you the spelling right. So nullable is going to be false. So nullable is going to be false, and then we can also provide in the quantity. So quantity, let's say quantity in stock, and the quantity in stock we can provide in to be it's going to be an integer, right? Because it's going to store the quantity, and then we're not going to allow decimals because the quantity is actually a whole number, right? It's supposed to be a whole number. You can say I have 4.5 goods, just be like 4 or 5, right? So it's going to be using an integer. So I hope you got that concept. So fields dot int field, and that's all we're going to say. Int field, and then we can give it a default. So we can say default. In case they didn't provide, we're going to say default is 10, just in case. Sorry, the default is 0 rather. So the default is 0. Yeah, and then we can also provide in the quantity, the quantity sold. So we can say quantity underscore sold. So the quantity sold is going to be fields dot the quantity sold is also going to be of type integer field, right? Because yeah, so you can say default, in case just we can say the default is 0, but to be required to provide in the quantity sold. Okay, yeah, but you can keep it there a default. And then we can also say the unit price. So the unit price is going to be the price of the product, each unit price. So it's going to be a decimal field because we can allow decimals. So it's going to be a decimal field, right? So fields dot decimal field, and then this decimal field we need to provide in two things. You can say max digits. We can I mean that to be 8, let's say 8, and then number of decimal places. We can say decimal underscore places is gonna be decimal place is gonna be a 2, and then the default is going to be 0.00, and then in here is supposed to be number of digits, and then this is supposed to be fields, yeah. And then I can also provide in the supplied by. So the supplied by is going to be a foreign key of field of another table that you're going to create. So we're going to say fields dot this is going to be fields dot foreign key field, and then in here I need to provide in the model which is going to read to. So I'm going to provide models, which is the name of the file, dot suppliers, which is going to be a table that I'm going to create very soon. So it's actually supplier singular, follow that naming convention, and then related, we can provide in the related name, and you can put the related name to be goods underscore supplied, right? So I can provide in the related name to be goods supplied. So now that we have that, let's go and actually now put in the last field is going to be revenue, and then the revenue is going to be fields dot this is going to be revenue can be also a decimal field, right? So decimal field, and in here I can provide in the max digits. I can provide max digits to be let's say 20, and then you can say decimal places. Decimal places can be, let's say 3, and then the default we can say is 0.00, and then 0.00. Okay, so in here I think that the decimal place should be also 2, because two decimal places I don't think can exceed 2, right? It should be 2 or under 2. So then we have all those fields. So each product is going to have a name, each product is going to have a quantity in stock, each product is going to have quantity sold, that's actually quantity sold, and then each product is going to have a unit price, is going to be of type decimal. Each product is going to be having a supplier, right? So each product can be supplied by someone. Okay, so let me just move the foreign field to be on its own here. So you can see we have the revenue. Each product is also going to have a revenue, and it's going to be of type decimal type. And then you're going to have a product. This product is going to be supplied by a supplier. This is going to be a foreign key to a table that I'm going to create called supplier, and we're going to provide in the details. Okay, so I hope you have understood till there. So let's go ahead and create the table for supplier. Let's call it supplier, and then for supplier we're going to inherit from model, and then each supplier is going to have an ID, and the ID is going to be fields dot this is going to be an int field, right? Because each primary key is going to be of type integer, and you can specify this a primary key is going to be true. So we're going to provide the primary key to be true, and each supplier is going to have a name, and then the name is going to be fields dot car field. So each is going to have a name and a car field, and then you can provide a max length. The max length can be, let's say, 20, so you're going to have a name of maximum of 20 characters, and you can provide the company in which the supplier comes from. So you can say company is the fields dot car field is going to be a car field as well, and then the max length, you can provide a max length to be, let's say, the name of the company has a max length of 20 characters as well. And then we can also provide in the email of the supplier, so this is going to be email, and then this is going to be a fields this is going to be also a car field, sorry, character field. And then this we can also provide in here the max length, so make sure I get that right. So max underscore length, that's actually th, and then the max length is going to be, let's say, email, let's say 100, I don't know. We can also provide in here the phone number of the supplier, which is going to be phone, and then the fields dot car field, and then you can provide in the max length, and then the max length can be let's say 15. I can leave that to be 15, or yeah, we can leave it to be 15 if you want. Yeah, so that's basically the suppliers table. So each supplier is going to have an ID that uniquely identifies the supplier. Each supplier is going to have a name, the company from which the supplier works, the email of the supplier, and then the phone number of the supplier. Okay, so now that we have that, we need to go ahead and actually create something known as Pydantic Models. If you know what Pydantic is, it's a library. I think it's a library in Python. You can just Google it. It's a very, very easy thing to use with FastAPI, and I find it very intuitive to use rather than using my SQL library, SQL alchemy or stuff, something like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually create those Pydantic models. So we're going to say from tortoise dot contrib dot Pydantic, you're going to import, you need to import Pydantic model creator. Okay, great. So now we're going to come down here, and then you're going to create Pydantic models. So here, so we're going to create the Pydantic models, and we're going to create the Pydantic models for the both products and the supplier. So let's start with the products. So we're going to call it product Pydantic, and this is going to be a Pydantic model creator. You're going to pass in our model name. So our model name is going to be good product. I call it product. Let's call it product. Okay, so product, and then product, I'm going to say product, and then the name of it, I'm just going to, the name of the table, I'm going to call it product, call it the same name to avoid confusion. And then I'm going to create two Pydantic models. One of them is going to be used to accept incoming data. So if you're going to accept incoming data, you don't need to accept the ID and other fields that are only read-only fields. Like the ID field is only read-only, right? So we're going to create a Pydantic model that is going to accept incoming data, and the incoming data is not going to have it's not going to contain read-only fields. So we're going to create another Pydantic model, and you're going to call it product underscore Pydantic in, and then this is going to be excluding the read-only fields, because whenever you're creating a user, right, the ID of the user is determined by the database, right? So you're not going to be expecting that from the database. So the ID is only a read-only field. So if you say Pydantic, we create a model again, and then we say exclude underscore read only equals to true, this will exclude the read only models, and we can use this model to be able to accept user inputs. So I'm going to go ahead and actually create it Pydantic, and I'm going to say I'm going to add in there, and I'm going to go Pydantic model creator, and I'm going to call pass in product because I want to create it for the product table, and I'm going to call it give it a different name. Okay, if you don't give it the same name, or else you get an error. So I'm going to call it product in, and then make sure that I specify one more field, exclude read only. So exclude read only is going to exclude the fields that are only read only fields. For example, the ID, as I explained earlier, because if you're creating a user, you don't expect them to pass in their ID, right? So that's all what the read only field is going to do. So now let's go ahead and actually create another one more Pydantic model. So this is going to be for the supplier. So I'm going to go to supplier underscore Pydantic, and then this is going to be Pydantic model creator, and I'm going to pass in here the supplier. So I'm going to pass in the supplier class, and then the name, I'm going to supply the name as well as supplier. The name is going to be supplier, and then I'm going to do the same thing for supplier. We also need to have a model that excludes the read-only fields for suppliers, right? So I'm going to do supplier underscore Pydantic in. This is going to be Pydantic model creator. I'm going to pass in supplier in here, supplier, and then the name is going to be supplier. This is going to be supplier in, and then make sure the names of the tables are different, or else you get an issue. Okay, so and then we're going to say exclude underscore read only, and this is going to be true to exclude the read only fields whenever you're trying to accept users input. And then you're going to see this just in a moment. For now it might not make clear sense to you, but just wait for me, and just bear with me. I'm going to explain this to you whenever you try to create our to accept user input. So this for now is just a basic concept of our database. So now that we have that in place, what we need to do right now is just to go back to our app, and then in our app, right, we're going to go ahead and actually write some code that to have our models registered whenever we try to execute our application. So now you can see, let me just open up this. You can see I have no database right here. I have no database file. Even if my application is running, you can see I have no database in my application yet. So if you have created a database, let's go ahead and actually make sure the database is created. So I'm going to go to app, and then from here I'm going to go to I'm going to say import some libraries from Tortoise .contrib.FastAPI, import register Tortoise. So this is just a library that comes from Tortoise contrib.api. You're going to import register Tortoise. So what register Tortoise function allows us to do, it's actually a function. It allows us to register our models, right? So I'm going to come here at the very bottom of the app, and I'm going to go register Tortoise model, and in here I'm going to provide in, you can see it takes in app. So I'm going to provide in the name of my app, which is just the instantiation of the app. So this app here is what I provide in here. Okay, and then I'm going to go to DB URL. So DB URL is just a route to that database. So I'm going to create an SQLite database. So it's going to be an SQLite, and then I'm going to go colon, and then two forward slashes, and then the name of database. I'm going to call it database.SQLite 3. Okay, I'm going to go database.SQLite 3, and then in here I'm going to provide in the modules. So I'm going to say modules. The modules is going to be a dictionary, so I'm going to write in dictionary, and I'm going to go models, and then I'm going to go in here and type in models. So models is the name of our models file here. Models, so it's actually going to be a list. So I'm going to say list models, and then this is where our model is going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and provide in one more argument. This is actually generate schema. This is going to be true to enable us to generate schema whenever we try to run our application. And then we're going to say add exception handlers, and I'm going to say this is true to handle for us those exceptions. So now after typing in that, you can find this on the official Flask documentation. So just copy that and paste it in your application, or just type along as I have did. So this is going to be your app instantiation. It's going to be the route to your database, and then the route to your database. I mean, this is going to be the models. It's going to be the models, and then we're providing that model here. I think it's the name of the file is going to be here, and then we're providing the generate scheme is going to be true, and then add exception handler is going to be true. So now that you have done that, you can go ahead and actually run check if our application is running again. So I'm going to close that, close this. Sometimes it gets stuck, so I'm just open up a new one. So I'm just deactivate, and I'm going to run the uvcon command. It's going to start our development server. So module fields has no attribute car field, so we've already made an error. So let's just go back and try to fix that error. So the error is somewhere around let's see, so fields. Let me just try to highlight all the fields. Okay, so it's actually the character field, so it's in here. So actually car field, that's that. So fields.car field, and then that's that. So let's check again. Try to close this. It got stuck again. I don't know why it freezes at times. So let me just try to refresh this. It has frozen again. So let me just create a new one. I don't know why this keep happening. So I'm going to press enter, and then you can see it says that application field already exists. Let's try to exit this one, close the terminal. Let me just clear that. It also has frozen. I really don't know why it keeps freezing. So it says that no module name supplier registered in app model. So no module name supplier. So let's see why it's getting the error. So yeah, so I have an error here. So this actually capital S supplier, okay, because this is the name of this class right here. So this is the name of this class that we provide in here, and I specified a small letter rather than a capital letter. So let's go ahead and actually make sure we repeat the process again. In my case, it freezes. I don't know if the same thing happens to you, but in your case, if it doesn't freeze, then you don't have to repeat this process again. Okay, so I'm going to go bin, and then activate, clear that, and then I'm going to go uvcon, and then app app, and then -- reload. So press enter, and then you can see that it's running. So you can go back to our application, try to refresh, and then you see everything works fine. So now that we have our database set up, we don't have any errors. So in the next tutorial, we're going to go ahead and actually try to create the CRUD functionality for the products, and then the upcoming video will create the CRUD functionality for the suppliers, and then we'll finally create the email functionality, and then we'll move on to front-end development. So yeah, now our model is set up, and this is the model. Each product can have an ID, a name, the quantity in stock, the quantity sold, the unit price, the revenue, and then the supplied by the supplier who supplied that specific product. Also, each product will have each supplier will have an ID that uniquely identifies them, their name, their company, their email, their phone number, and yeah. And we're simply going to ahead and actually create the Pydantic models, and we came up here, and then we registered our models with Tortoise by specifying these parameters. So that's all. And you also learned how to return a simple JSON using FastAPI. And don't forget that this app.get is actually a decorator and not just app.get. Okay, it's not like a class or something. It's actually a decorator. If you're not about decorators in Python, I have a whole series on decorators on my channel. I'm going to leave a card up here. You can check out that tutorial. If I forget to leave a card, you can also find it on my real channel page. You can just go to my playlist, and you can find it there. So guys, thanks for watching. Thanks. In the next tutorial, go ahead and actually try to create the CRUD functionality for the product. So see you in the next tutorial. Keep safe.